I'll do a little introduction later on, but welcome to the hidden danger of well-roundedness. This is team dynamics for generalists. I always like to tell stories. I'm going to start with the story. Who's got kids? Anybody? Yes, we got two people. Driving, way past driving age or in that age? Teens and beyond. Yes, live to tell the tale. For anybody who's going to have kids, you know, it's because that's something to get through. So a few years ago, I was teaching my youngest daughter, Ansley, to drive, and it only took me 4 daughters, but I figured out that there's this pattern to my daughter's driving styles that totally matches their personality type. And there's Ansley, that's her. So as I go into this, I always like to have a visual, and I've got visuals around the room. You'll see I've got posters up with this types because we're going to talk about those, but sometimes I'll use these names interchangeably because it really gets to the heart of what that type is all about. But there are 4 basic temperaments. This is where they fit in the car, so you'll have that visual. So my oldest daughter, Savannah, her minor type, usually we have a major and a minor, is improver. It's a C on the disc. So she's the classic backseat driver. And she's in the driver's seat. So what I found with her is she was careful and cautious and conscientious as a driver, which is great, keeps us out of jail, keeps us safe, all those kind of things that you're looking for. But I had to yell at her nonstop to get her to go the speed limit. So, you know, careful and cautious actually becomes dangerous after a while. So that was true to her personality type. Then my third daughter, Caroline, she is a D on the disc. So she's the one who always wants to be in the driver's seat. So she was in her sweet spot. And she was large and in charge. She was fast. She was efficient. She was pretty terrifying to drive with, honestly, and that was just like getting out of the driveway. So I thought, okay, true to her personality type. My second daughter, Casey, she is a connector. She's the I on the disc. So she's the one that really enjoys shotgun, because then she's by the sidewalk so she can wave at the people. They love in charge of the radio. It's all about the fun. And so she's doing that while she's driving. And I'm thinking, eyes on the road, girl, you know, like we're not going to make it through. So she was true to her personality type. Now, I didn't have any S children. I would have paid good money for one of those because they are just the most easygoing, kind of personable, approachable, amenable kinds of people. But that was not it. So back to Ansley. So Ansley's personality type has been much more difficult to nail down, and I do this for a living. So I have coined a term for Ansley, and that's just the confuser. The confuser. So all through high school, Ansley thought she was one type, and then it would change year to year. Her sisters thought she was another type. I thought she was something else. And true to form, her driving was completely confusing too. When I'd get her in the car, she'd go ahead and start it up, buckle her seatbelt, and then she'd just kind of slowly start driving. And she'd just kind of wander around, almost like a nomad, just going all over the place. And then finally, she'd look at me and she'd say, "Hey, Mom, where am I going?" I was like, that's a great question. Great question, Ansley. So your personality is meant to provide direction to what you should be doing and where you should be going. It's actually one of those breadcrumbs that's meant to mark your path in your life, in your career, and in your startup. It explains what you're really good at and also what you're not good at. And those blind spots really create problems on teams. It explains and clarifies your motivators. If you're trying to motivate your people, to understand that based on personality is super helpful because there's a lot of patterns that go with motivators. It also shows you what your fears are. And if you understand that someone is going to react when you start pushing a button that gets close to their fear, you can kind of distance yourself and not take things personally. So understanding that is very helpful. Your personality also determines how you communicate, what your style is, what your needs are, things that your opposite type especially doesn't need at all, and they would never imagine you needed. So that's the kind of thing that creates miscommunication and conflict at the workplace. But too many of us are like Ansley, and this is especially true of utility players who can do a lot of things. Can do is a great skill set, and it is a great attitude, but it is a horrible identity. It is a few things. As well-roundedness, which I really consider as like can-do on steroids, as an identity, it's confusing, it's exhausting, and it's isolating. And these are not the kind of feelings that you want to build a really great culture. So it's confusing. Well-roundedness, for your individual contributors especially, makes people feel like a cog in the wheel. So they feel like they are just valued for their production, but who they are in terms of their strengths or their values or what really matters to them as a person, those things remain unknown to the company, but also to them, which in turn kills engagement. Gallup's 2022 Global Workplace Study revealed that 79% of employees are not engaged or actively disengaged at work. This is the whole quiet quitting thing. And those numbers are really high. So understanding that people will engage 6 times more frequently when they work out of their strengths, but they need to know what their strengths are, and so do you, so you can help them get into that sweet spot. So it makes a real difference. Well-roundedness is also exhausting. When you feel like you have to be all things to all people day after day, it can be a recipe for burnout. A recent report from Indeed showed that 52% of all workers now are feeling burnt out, and that number is up 9% since the pandemic. So when people burn out, they leave. And in Inc.'s, I think it was the March issue of Inc., they talked about a survey that Deloitte did on CEOs. CEOs rated burnout as their top workforce challenge and retention as their top challenge overall. So keeping your people by helping them understand how to grow in your company and be recognized and acknowledged, it is key. And then finally, well-roundedness as an identity is isolating. When people can do many, many things, they usually aren't really good at asking for help. And so they silo because they feel uneasy about their limitations, and they struggle to collaborate well. According to the American Institute of Stress, 32% of workplace stress is people-related. So when people are siloing, it's a lot of times because of miscommunication, conflict, things they don't feel understood, and also they don't feel like they can ask for help. So I'm going to show you today how to define your behavioral style for your team, for yourself, so you can communicate more effectively and you can work more efficiently and you can leverage this type of diversity on your team. So we're going to cover a few things. I'm going to talk about the what and where of personality. I'm going to talk about the meaning of your results on the quiz, and I'll give you a little chance to do that if you haven't had time yet. And then I'm going to dive into all 4 types and talk about what that means in terms of the dynamics on your team. And what you'll find for those of us who love personality is this is going to have meaning, you know, at home, at work. You're like, oh my gosh, my brother totally makes sense now. It's all becoming clear. Everything. This applies in many different realms, but I'll talk about it primarily at work. I want to take just a couple of minutes and introduce myself. So my name is Dale Wilshire, and I'm the owner of Your Authentic Personality, which is a coaching and training company that I started about 10 years ago. So I'm a life and leadership coach. I am a trainer in DISC personality types. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm an award-winning author, and my dentist says I have really good teeth. So I got that going for me. But the reason this topic means so very much to me is that I have spent most of my life trying to be all things to all people, both internally and feeling that kind of pressure externally. You know, first in my family where my personality type was not the favorite. And a lot of times that's where personality mass start is in our original culture, whether community you're a part of or your family culture. So I tried to be anybody that was pleasing to the people around me. I felt it again in graduate school where I was getting my doctorate in molecular biology. And I was like, this is the wrong environment for me. It's super theoretical. I don't know what we're doing. I just want to create some vaccines, but we were studying Haemophilus influenza, and it was too theoretical. But what I didn't realize is that was a C environment, and I was a D. So I kept thinking something's wrong with me. And that's what happens when we think we're in the wrong environment and we feel like we're not a part of the culture, then we start to morph. To my time as a single mom, for 10 years, I had full custody of all 4 of my daughters, and we were facing significant mental health challenges, and I had no village. So talk about being all things to all people and trying to keep everyone alive. All those different experiences, they sucked the identity right out of me. And so I lived confused and isolated and also exhausted for way too long. But that was then. and this is now, I now know what my personality means and what I do well and what my passions are and what my purpose is. And I get to help professionals do that. I say I help people make sense of their strengths and their stories so they can make the most of their time and their talent. So whether it's finding meaning in your work, because there will be those times that it dips, or for your people, meaning is a very personal definition. And if you understand these types of things, starting with personality, you can help people find way more meaning in their work. It also helps to create high-functioning teams and allows you to contribute to your highest level, because the ultimate goal is not well-rounded people, but a well-rounded team. One with a variety of unique strengths and broad experiences that together can take your startup where you want it to go. So let's jump into the first part of this, and that is the what and where of personality. So personality is defined as a characteristic way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. And basically, it distinguishes your differences from other people's differences. That's really what it's about, how you're different. You have certain qualities if you have a personality, and you don't have others. That's what makes you distinct. But personality, that term in and of itself, it implies limitations. You don't have all the strengths. You're not all the characteristics. And that's something that well-rounded individuals have a hard time seeing and admitting. Personality is unique, and it's specific, and it's sharp. In their book, Now Discover Your Strengths, Marcus Buckingham and Don Clifton, they are part of the Gallup organization. They said this, that excellent performers must be well-rounded is one of the most pervasive myths that we hope to dispel. When we studied them, excellent performers were rarely well-rounded. On the contrary, they were sharp. So while your skill set might be broad, your personality and your strengths are sharp. So the earliest recording of personality actually started with the physician Hippocrates back in 400 BC. And he thought personality was related to body fluids. He thought connectors had a lot of blood. He thought improvers and doers, C's and D's, had a dominant bile type, and he thought S's, stabilizers, and I'm just pointing at these different posters, he thought they had a lot of phlegm. And I think that might be the most unfortunate. You know, that's just not something that anybody wants to be known for. And since then, we've disproven the body fluids, but the way he grouped personality characteristics into these four types, that has actually remained, and it has set the stage for all the four-type personality systems that we use today. And then in 1926, a psychologist by the name of William Marston, he's actually a contemporary of Carl Jung, who did all the Myers-Briggs typologies. They were around at the same time. This guy is also the creator of Wonder Woman. I mean, he's like, I know, like this amazing talents. But he wrote this book, we love this, The Emotions of Normal People. Because as a psychologist, it's all about abnormal psychology. And he didn't want to study that. He wanted to study all of us normal people. And what he found is there were four different domains. There was dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. And that has then created the DISC. He did not patent any of this, trademark anything, so it's in the public domain. So you'll see a lot of companies who do DISC types. Please don't do the free tests. Those are so inaccurate. But any other types, there's three main companies that have validated, verified, through psychometric testing. Definitely use one of those. But it is the most popular in corporate America, with more than 50 million people having taken the DISC. How many people here have taken a DISC? Okay, maybe about half. Awesome. And so as we go through, I want you to listen, because I'm a big proponent that your work type should not be different than your home type, that you have one why. You don't have a professional why and a personal why. We want to bring the best of you and your greatest strengths into the workplace. So think about that as we go through all this, sometimes thinking about both places. And since I can't give you an online DISC, that's how I do them right here, I thought we would take this personality test. So did everybody get a chance to do it? So what I'm asking you to do is put checks by all the strengths and all the weaknesses of your type. Again, it's not gone through all the rigid psychometric testing, but it's available. We can do it right here and now, and it's pretty fun. Think too, if you've already filled it out, by filling it out, please do, as a generalist kind of industry and a generalist that you might be yourself, please fill it out by what you naturally do. Like I could say, if I am well fed and I am well rested, I can be patient. But nobody has ever said, hey, Dale, you really rock patience. Nobody has ever said that. So think about what you most naturally do, not every single strength you've had in your whole life. That's important. So then from there, total up each of the 4 boxes. And as you're finishing that out, because we're going to look at those totals in just a minute, I'll tell you a little story. So I was up in Cheyenne a few years ago, and I was giving a talk on personality and favoritism to a group of much older ladies. It was a faith-based group. I think the average age was 80. I mean, it was a much older group. It's kind of great to see them all coming together, and they're pretty wonderful. But I did say I had some extra information for their type, but would they just take the information for their top type? Just one. It was kind of a big group. It was over 100, so I said, just take the top one. And so after the talk, I was talking to people as they came up in line, and my daughter, Savannah, the one who was careful and cautious, she's a chemical engineer now, she was working my book table. So she was in charge of all the resources. And when I finished talking to people and I looked over at the table, it was cleared out. And she was like, oh my gosh. She goes, those gals, like, they're scary, Mom. And they cleared the table. They came up to me and they showed me their tests, and they showed me that they had every one of the strengths and they had none of the weaknesses for all 4 types. I was like, so I just want y'all to know, well-roundedness may not just be a startup issue. Your grandma may have it too. All right? So just be aware of that. I was like, we need to work on a little self-awareness there. Now, closer to our age, there's our personality test. But I've done a survey. This is the card that you have on your chair. But I've surveyed over 500 professionals, and I've asked them, how often do you feel like you have to be all things to all people? So I'm curious if y'all want to throw out a few numbers. What % of the time do you think, and this is not just startups, these are general marketplace professionals, how much of the time do people think they need to be all things to our people? What do you think? 90, thank you. I know. 80, all right. Look how high these are. Like, this is a problem, right? Anybody else? All right. Did somebody say something? How often do you feel like you have to be all things to all people? 95, it just keeps going up. Where am I? Hold on. All right, so the answer is actually 68%. So you get a little gift. Look at that. I know. So I have a second question, everyone. So there on this, the second question that's on the survey says, how often you wish that you were someone else, like you had the strengths of someone else. For me, I would have said 10, clearly with all of the issues that I talked about. But what do you think that number is for how often people wish they could be like someone else? 90? You think 90? Okay. I mean, you guys know what's at stake here. We got some chocolate. It's good. Just throw out a number. 60? 50. Anybody else? 70? 40? Thank you. Like, this is good. Like, we got chocolate on the line here. Yes, it actually is 50. Thank you, everybody. I know. Yes, we like some chocolate. All right, I would love to have your answers represented on this. If you would, those first 3 questions on the left, I would love to hear what your thoughts are. I've got a little basket up here if you want to put those in at the end. If you want any other information, you can certainly add that on the right. But let's go through and look at your test results to see if you might have a well-roundedness issue. So looking at your totals, so the red flags of well-roundedness start like this. If all 4 of your totals were fairly close in number, that speaks to a well-roundedness problem. So somebody's like, I won't ask anyone to raise their hands. It also can speak to being an S, a stabilizer. So I want you to listen to that one when I go in depth on that one. That's pretty common. If 3 of your totals were pretty close in number, that speaks to a well-roundedness issue. All right, red flag number 3, if your 2 highest were connector and improver or doer and stabilizer, those are opposites. That speaks to a personality mask and a well-roundedness problem. Red flag number 5, you just feel conflicted, kind of like the confuser a lot of the time. You feel like you've got the gas on while you've got the brake on at the same time. You feel like you're being caught up in too many things. That's a sign of well-roundedness issue. Or if you came in with someone today, or you take one of these home, and since we have a whole bunch, you're welcome to do this, and they looked at the way you filled this out, and they laughed a little. You know, kind of like the grandmas. Like, I'm pretty sure you don't have all those strengths. And I would have checked a couple weaknesses. So I do have, if you're, let me actually show you what it looks like on the disc. So when we take a disc, we get 3 graphs. You get your public self, your perceived self, and also your stress self, which is really interesting. So this shows 3 above the midline. The midline is the 0, just kind of the darker bold line. So we're looking for each of those circles represents one of the disc types. So you've got 3 above. So that's a well-roundedness issue, because we know 2 of those are opposites. This second one is what we call a burnout pattern, where all 4 are above the midline. So you are literally trying to be all things, and it usually speaks to a sense of uncertainty and helplessness about what the expectations are for an environment and who you're supposed to be. And then there's another pattern that we look for, and that's close to being all above the midline, but we call that, because it's almost horizontal, that is a chameleon pattern. Again, it's speaking to you trying to be all things to all people. So that will come up. I'll put these over here. I have a copy of the DISC test. If you want to see, you get a 15-page report. They're great to be able to use. Some companies use them just for hiring, and then they kind of forget about them. I think it needs to be a part of the culture, and that's why we're going to go into this so we can talk about all these. Now, I'm talking about you as a person, and I'll be talking about individuals, but teams and organizations of any size, countries, they have personality styles. So your style could be dominant and direct, or it could be conscientious and careful. It could be calm and consistent. It could be influencing and inspiring. Every company has its own different personality style. And when companies are young or smaller, usually it reflects the founder's personality type, and that makes sense. But what you have to be careful about is as everything starts to grow, as humans, we tend to hire people like ourselves. They're just the best, right? The people who are like us, we don't know that, we don't realize we're doing that, but that's what we do. And many times that's not who you need on the team. So thinking in terms of strengths and using DISC types can be very, very helpful to guard against that kind of unconscious bias that we're all dealing with. And it will create a more inclusive environment. 32% of startups go down, they say, because they chose the wrong people. So it's kind of a big deal. And then when I train organizations, this is something to look for. I do a group report. So a group report averages all the DISCs that were taken by the employees and gives you that cumulative culture, that cumulative personality style. And I find this helpful particularly in 2 areas. Number 1, to be able to really leverage the strengths of your team. The Gallup organization has shown that most of us try to fix our weaknesses, and that will only take us to average in that area. But if we really want to go into a source of genius, we have got to build our strengths. So it reminds you what the flavor is, what the culture is as a personality, and how to use those specifically to address challenges. The second part that I find to be helpful is to realize who are the outliers on your team. Who is not being represented in the culture that you really need to listen to, because they have a completely different perspective that you need to hear and something that is just not natural for everyone to think about. That creates psychological safety, which Google has shown that it is the top predictor of high-performing teams, is psychological safety. So here's what and we're such a small group, but if y'all will bear with me, what I always do when we do this is I would love it if y'all would move to your section. And some of you are like, I got really comfortable here. Some C is like, please. I picked this chair for a reason. It's right where I want it. But what I'd like to do is put the connectors in the eyes from the test here, whatever your major was. If you're a stabilizer, be in the back there. If you're an improver or a C, please be in the back here. And if you're a doer, please be up here.
So what if I am equally stabilizer and improver?
You can pick one.
I just pick one.
You can pick one. Yes. And I won't be checking anyone's test. All right, so in the doer section, look at that. So good. This is my section, so we'll talk about it. All right, I'm sorry. I know. No. Thank you. I appreciate y'all being flexible and doing this so now I can talk to you as a group. And the cool thing is you're with your people. Like you're with people who get you, who have, the same issues that you do, have the same needs that you do. And this is my party crowd, by the way, right up here. The connector crowd. Did you guys all go to the thing last night? I know that Lauren did. Like this. This is the connector crowd that we'll use. So let's talk about it. Thank you all for doing that. All right. So let's just look at all 4 types first, and then I'm going to dive into each one. So the measure of your doer, or the amount of D you have in you, is how aggressively or assertively you respond to challenges. So this is my section right here. Are you in the doer category as well? CD. Okay, so you're feeling the middle of it. That's all right. As long as you're sitting in the confuser section, that's all right. That's good. And this is my sector as well. So these are our intense problem solvers. Everything is a puzzle to them, and that really is their source of genius. But if you think about it, the lower your D is, that means the less aggressive you go after challenges. You kind of let stuff happen. You let stuff play out. That is very true of an S. So that's why these opposites really matter. The measure of your I, the connector, is how verbal or persuasive you attempt to be. So the higher it is, the more you're going to communicate and try to convince people because you believe it's the best for them. It doesn't have to be for a bad reason. But the less I or connector, and usually the more C you have in you, the less verbal you're going to be. You don't need to convince anyone. You're like, the data speaks for itself. Can I get an amen? Thank you. Yes. Well, for this, I would have you take a disc to show, because then I can look at it when it's in an 8. Then we're talking about a really, it's just, I don't want to say a frequency, but it is a higher level where you can see that much more. Some are lower where it's hard to tell. So what do you have?
I range from like a 7 on the D to a 17 on an I.
Well, clearly, yeah, the winner. But is that your second? The D was the second?
No, 10's my second.
And what was that?
Both C and the S.
Okay, well, listen for that, because that would be an opposite. So you could be, now I rarely see, having done hundreds of these, people coming up with 1. So again, this is not gone through all the rigid testing, and because you don't have to pick, but I would say you're in a great spot being here. And then listen for your minor. Is it, because if you're on this side, you're relationally oriented, and if you're on this side, you're task oriented. There are different kinds of qualities that you have in common with different people on the square. So the zone of genius for the connectors is a lot of times that ability to persuade and to be verbal. S measures your pace. So the pace that you go after activities and responsibilities. So the slower the pace, the higher your S, meaning you're more deliberate as you go through things. Also, the pace of people and relationships always is better done slow. So that's why they're very good relationally. So it's the pace, but they resist change because they're steady and they're stable. You can count on them. The process is going to be consistent. So that's the measure of your S. The C, the more C that you have in you, the more that you respond to the rules and regulations set by other people. So you respect rules, you like hierarchy, you maybe even respect dynasties, like different things that have a lot of structure to it. It's proof that it works. Now a D likes rules, but only the ones that they set. That's like, yes. And we'll get to these. So even as you're doing, think about somebody at work that's driving you crazy, and think if that person might be on the opposite side from where you are, or there's something that is, now you're going to get some understanding, because we judge ourselves by our intention and we judge other people by their behavior. But by understanding disc types, you can understand someone's intention so that you can distance yourself from it, not take it personally. It creates a culture of kindness and respect. So I'm going to jump into these 4 types. Are we doing good? Any questions? All right, so the D is the doer. So the words for D are dominant, direct, decisive, demanding, determined, and the doer that I keep using. And if you'll think about this, for some women, and I am one, this is my main type. I am major doer, minor connector. Being dominant is not like a word that I ever was really excited about. I went to college at the University of Georgia, deep south, and I was hoping to get a date. And I was not thinking it would be a great comment to have somebody go, hey, let me set you up with Dale. She's super dominant. I was like, that's not something. So there's certain, the two types over here we consider classically masculine, even though they're not. But those types, that's what we do, and we consider these classically feminine. That's why I put men in those pictures, and I put women over here. So just know that. That's some of our unconscious bias with that. D's are 10% of the population. Thank goodness, because they like to be in charge, and we can't have that many chiefs without some Indians. So they are always asking the question, am I winning? Am I winning? You're like, okay, that explains that guy. Am I winning? And that's actually a little bit even male. When they have, I don't know if any of y'all have read the book by Marshall Goldsmith, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Great book. And he talks about there are some behaviors that men have that are different than what women have in inhibiting their growth in their career. And this is more of a male issue to be too focused on winning. I find women are more competitive with themselves and men are more competitive with others. But D's value time and achievement. Time. It's always about that. So Caroline, the one who scared me getting out of the driveway, when she was 15 years old, she went to work for Chick-fil-A, and they ended up putting her in drive-through, which is awesome because they have a 3-minute window. From the time you order to the time you pick it up, you've got 3 minutes. She had that thing down to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So I was like, now that's working in your sweet spot. So those kind of things. Put people who are fast because done is better than perfect. So that's where this battle happens. This is perfect and this is done. So you want to blend so that you get a good product, but you actually get it out. They communicate rapidly and directly. And especially for stabilizers and improvers at the back, it kind of freaks you out sometimes. Like they are just drilling a hole in me in the way that they're looking at me. Like, can they look away? Just a little bit. But it's very rapid and there's a lot of volume. I can always tell when I'm working with someone who might be wearing a mask based on how they sound, what they're likely to be. So a lot of volume coming out. And everything is about the bottom line. So when I have gotten to a pattern when my kids would text me, and because I value their time, I would just text them back and use the letter K. And that letter K meant, thanks for texting me. I read the whole thing. I'm on it. I hope you have a great day. And for me, that's all wrapped up in the letter K. So they were kind of used to it. They could tell when I was mad because I put a period on the K. And that's usually what D's say. Like everybody thinks that's the question. They're like, "Are you mad at me?" Okay, that's always it. So because we kind of look, because we have the resting face on this right side. So one time I was with my kids and somebody called me or somebody texted me and I responded with K and they called me immediately, and I said, "Why are you calling?" They said, "Are you mad at me?" I was like, "Why would I be mad at you? I just sent you K," and they're like, "Yeah, because you sent me K. Are you mad at me?" And that's when my kids were like, "You K other people? You cannot be doing that, Mom." Handful of flowers, unicorn emoji, anything to soften that up. But I'm thinking I'm respecting everyone's time, and that's how I love them. That's how I appreciate what they're bringing. So remember that. If D's are getting too abrupt with you, they might be respecting your time. Their leadership style is commanding and directive. They love goals and deadlines, results, lots of hustles. Usually they do struggle with workaholism. So here, let's talk about some of the ways, what some of their fears are and some of their strengths are. Are you guys all thinking about somebody at work who's got this personality type? Yes. And we're laughing. Yeah, all right. So here's the emoji. I'm not bossy. I have leadership skills. Got it? So that's, again, a girl who's just trying, because girls were always called bossy when they were D's. It's tough to be the one who wants to be in charge when you're young, because nobody wants you in charge. Some of these you have to grow into. So their greatest fear, the D's greatest fear, is loss of control, loss of power, not being able to make a decision. When someone cuts them off in traffic and they did not choose it, it feels like a loss of decision making and being taken advantage of. That's the thing that's going to send them, into the orbit. So that's when they're going to lose it. So if you know that, it makes more sense when someone is starting to go that way. It may not be about you, it's probably more about them. And again, they're task-oriented. I don't find they're as emotionally intelligent unless they've really worked on it. They're very good with tasks and not at all as good with emotions. So they're goal-oriented. They will always do better if you give them a deadline and a goal. Right now I'm training for a half marathon. in Boulder or the Boulder-thon, it's so much better for me to have that kind of goal than just to go out and run. I would much rather have a goal. They're very tough. They don't like weakness. This is where they struggle with vulnerability, but they are very tough-minded, and they'll do hard things. Quick, like I said, done is better than perfect. They're intense. And when someone told me I was intense, I was like, really? You think I'm intense? And they're like, oh yeah, has nobody told you that before? So you need to be asking people what they're thinking. That 360 type of feedback is really intense. So if I say something and an S says something, it sounds so much nicer coming out of their mouth. Lower volume, more pleasing, exact same words. So my husband's at the back of the room, and when there's a problem in the neighborhood, guess who gets to go out and talk to the neighbors? Because regardless of what is said, it will come out so much better from his mouth. Yes. So thank you, Jeff, for being that way. So, competitive. Again, that's something that you'll see with D's. So if you can make it a competition, that engages them. Very independent. And this is tough for individual contributors who want to rise to a place of leadership. They need to have an area where they can be responsible for something, where you don't tell them how to do it, they get to figure it out. Give them a problem, let them solve it. So if they can have a lot of responsibility, it helps them to engage at a level where they may not be in charge. Powerful, courageous, these are your risk takers. If you need to do something that feels like you are living on the edge, these are the people who are going to help you do it. They burn bridges all the time because they're making decisions. Sometimes you can't hold on to everything. They're good at saying no. Yeah?
So what if these are characteristics that you're trying to cultivate in yourself?
And you're in the connector side. And you're wanting to be more like this. So this would be, they say that greatness is found in the extremes. One side you're going to come to the planet with, and one side you're going to develop. And so this can be, I have a whole nother talk about kind of balancing them out and some of the skills that help you bring it. That's a big question. But it kind of is going to some of the things that they like. Using deadlines, engaging. I find connectors always do their best work. I have a lot of clients who are connectors. They do it best with other people. So if other people can help you set goals that then, because they know about it and you're engaged with them and they matter, their opinion or how it's going to fall to them if you don't, I find that totally moves connectors into place. So I would use your strengths to then tap into some of those other skills. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Great. And there's a lot of good things with that, but it's both big high energy on top of these, because these are your classic extroverts up front and those are your classic introverts. Let's see, authoritative, I said that, very confident. And sometimes they don't even know what they're talking about, but they totally come off as confident and you're like, okay, I can do that. Because they like things like bumper cars. Just get them out there and they'll bump around. And they'll figure it out because that's what they do. So that can help you kind of get over some hurdles sometimes. Motivating. Growth is a combination of challenge and support. In fact, they found that grit, whether you're developing it in yourself or your people or even your own children, you need an equal amount of challenge and support. These two especially will bring the challenge, and these two will bring the support. And so that's why you leverage your strengths and then you learn the skills to bring the other part. Or you enlist someone else. It really creates a lot of appreciation. I was just talking to a CEO yesterday who talked about she is a connector stabilizer. And she was saying how she has beat herself up for years for not being good with details. Until finally she realized it's never going to happen. She just needs her CFO to really step in and do that work. This creates appreciation because it's a well-rounded team. Very organized. Doers and improvers kind of share this, but improvers love order. They love the beauty. Like you guys shop at the Container Store. You want everything beautiful. You guys are like, yes, it is beautiful. For the doer, it's not so much about the beauty, it's the efficiency. If everything is a place, then you can just move out and get stuff done. And very, very bold. All right, I'm going to move to the second one. The connector. So this is the high I. So the words are influencer, you're interested, you're inspiring, you're impulsive, you're infectious, your laughter's infectious, your energy's infectious, you're an initiator, you guys are the pioneers. You're not great with follow-up. Yeah, that's because you want to start it, but then you get kind of bored because you're all about the novelty. You have more dopamine receptors. Doers and connectors have more dopamine receptors, and those are fueled by novelty. So if you can keep doing new things, it keeps you engaged. But when it gets to the boring part, that's where stabilizers, you guys rock the process. You can manage that, and you can keep it consistent. So that's where, again, you get the people in the right place. So connectors are 20% of the population. And you like things the fun way. Doer wants things my way, and you want things the fun way. And what's interesting is, and you're usually partnered up, whether you're married or just in a relationship, with your opposite. So be aware of that. So what I see is, connectors a lot of times will partner up with improvers. And improvers are very academic. And it makes connectors feel like maybe they're too silly. Maybe they're not smart enough. And so they will start to get more serious and take on that mask. All of these have the same level of intelligence. More geniuses come out of improver, and it's like Einstein says. He said, I'm not more smart than anyone else, I just stay with things longer. It's that reflective piece. So a lot of times we will lose some of the fun because they think they need to be more serious to prove themselves to a watching world. So your question, connectors, is always, do you like me? And it sounds silly, but it's like you can't influence or inspire, be a visionary for someone if they're not connected to you. They're like Southwest Airlines is a connector airline. That's what they're there for, the common man. They used to hire cheerleaders. Cheerleaders is classic connector. And we were on a flight, and my high-I daughter, the one who was always on the radio and talking to people, she was so happy because she got out the bag of peanuts that they gave her, and it says, just because we like you. She was like, I like them too. And that's the thing. You have kind of magic sparkle dust with people because you like people, so people like you. There's a social intelligence to who you are. You guys should be used in pitches because you understand how to be persuasive. You should be used in anything that is forward-facing with being a spokesperson. You communicate rapidly and spiritedly. So usually there's a lot of facial expressions, there's a lot of movement of the hands, all that kind of stuff. And this group would like the rest of you to know that that is their inside voice. They've been using it for a long time. They're like, that's all I got. That's my inside voice. Love to talk, love to communicate. These are our greatest communicators. They're the ones who will answer a rhetorical question from time to time. And the rest are like, what? And when they were little, y'all tell me if this is true, but usually this is what I hear. When the teacher asked a question like, what's the capital of Alaska? What you heard was, who wants to share? And you're like, that's where you get those answers. So I taught Vacation Bible School once, and I think we were doing like Daniel on the Lion's Den, and I asked a question, and this one little girl's hand just popped right up. And I was like, oh my gosh, star student. I said, well, what do you think? She goes, my dad drinks a lot of beer. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. That's all she heard. Who wants to share? So sometimes you're but you're going to feel more personal connection with your improvers. Your leadership style is energizing. It's always personal. It's all about experiences and connections. Very visionary. So your greatest fear is what Michael's is. When asked if he would rather be loved or feared, he just wants people to fear how much they love him. So he's kind of your classic connector right there. So anything that involves being left out, whether you didn't get, lost an investor, you were rejected from a job, whatever it might have been, anything revolving in rejection is going to be a tough spot. And that's not at all what the improver worries about. So you're like, what is wrong with you? That's when you're thinking, what is wrong with you? And by the way, if you use these terms, you're never allowed to use the phrase, you're such an S. You're such a C. So that's like using the negative. You can say your C is showing or your C is very dialed up. Could we maybe dial it down a little? And by the way, weaknesses are just strengths that have gone too far. So that's why we don't want to get rid of your weaknesses. We just want to dial them back down so we can be in your sweet spot. So y'all are very people-oriented. Like I said, there's the social intelligence. Everybody thinks that you are their best friend. Like y'all, and people are like, you're not wait a minute. The other people around are like, I thought you were my best friend. And they're like, no, she's my best friend. So y'all just have a quantity kind of thing going on. You sometimes lack a little bit of a filter because you're such great communicators. Would anybody agree? Maybe a little problem with TMI? Like sometimes you just need to cut it. and just let that no stand right where it is. But great spokespeople. These are your visionaries. So I see a lot of startups who are headed by eyes because of the vision. But then they lack the follow through or the detail that's needed and all the other components that will continue to take it from there. Y'all are the greatest brainstormers that we have. You have what's called ideaphoria, and it allows you to create, because your brain's kind of always in motion, these new ideas that will take you into that right part of your brain. High energy, if you don't have ADD, someone probably wondered if you had ADD. And there is a personality type of childhood, and that's what this is. So it doesn't mean that you're childish, it means you're childlike. And so y'all will age better than anyone else. Now, the improver, you have the personality type of adulthood. So when you were little, did people say, like, can you lighten up? Can you please act like a kid because you're super serious? And you were smarter than all your teachers, because usually that's what it feels like when you are a little bit more mature than everyone else. Generous and touchy-feely. This group a lot of times is more emotional and also touchy-feely. And this group is the last part of that. Like, you want a big zone of space, and this can get us in a lot of trouble. So making sure that we keep our hands to ourselves is important, but it was just because we love you. Comedians come out of this, creative types, but it's very different. Connectors and improvers are both very creative, but it's almost the difference between like Miranda Lambert and Nirvana, or Evanescence. You've got a serious, kind of deeper type of creativity. You've got a lighter, kind of a more optimistic type of creativity. So those are some of the things that we think of with the I's. Now, S's are different. S's are steady and stable. Your words are status quo. You would like things to stay like they are because it's working. Why mess it up? Shy, savers, silent majority. Y'all are 50% of the population. So between majors and minors, this is where most people will land. Service-minded. Your question you're always asking is, are we in agreement? Are we in agreement? Because it's always about everybody. You like things our way. You want everyone to agree and be on board. You also like things the easy way. And I always thought of that as kind of a diss, but actually I see it as really a source of genius. You can find the shortest line from 2 points where the D is like, I am climbing to the top of the tree. I want it to be a challenge. I wanted to do the hardest thing. You're like, the low-hanging fruit actually works. You can just pick it right here. So that's why you've got to listen to all your different types. They communicate slowly and considerately. So they think everybody on this side is exhausting. So you know that. So if you are working with an S, you slow things down a little bit. You're not changing who you are. You're adapting to accommodate what someone might be able to hear better. They ask rather than tell. In fact, you two at the back are askers. The two in the front are more tellers. And the back people will stay silent just to avoid conflict. So your leadership style as an S, and sometimes Ds will think you're too soft, but that's not the case. You have a humble leadership style, you have a supportive leadership style, and a very inclusive style. So you like team huddles and open door policies and listening and being in the trenches. So the biggest fear here is change. He's afraid to leave AOL because he's too afraid to change. So greatest fear is also conflict. And that's where we lose your voice. Because for you would prefer to be in connection with people rather than fight it out. And this is where S's are usually partnered up with D's. And S's are super happy when harmony happens, whether in the company or in the relationship. And they're like, oh, this is great. We finally got here. We're all getting along. And the D is going, oh my gosh, we're stagnant. I've got to stir the pot. Something needs to happen. We need to start growing and digging in again. So you're always at odds with those kinds of things. So you're patient. You don't think you're patient, but trust me, compared to the rest of us, y'all are very, very patient. You're cooperative, and you are the great collaborators. Loyal and trustworthy, likable. Your report card always read, plays well with others. So humble and quiet. Y'all are like the stabilizer that talks people off walls. When everything goes chaotic, y'all are the ones that can calm everything down. Very tolerant of people, and you bring consensus. So let me wrap this up by doing the C. So y'all's words are conscientious and cultured, controlled. I see very amount of sophistication with you. Correct. You're always looking for the correct result. More cautious, creative, color-coded. Was anybody little and you color-coded all your stuff? Thank you. And did you have a sibling who was an I who just wanted to mess it all up and oh, yeah, yes. So leave their desk alone. In fact, it's one of the words that I use, and the next one is that C's are particular. And it's not a materialism, but their stuff is usually an extension of them. So it's kind of like you don't touch them and you don't touch their stuff. I was doing a talk with someone with a small executive team, and the man next to me I found out was a C. Because his glass was kind of in my way, and I was doing some stuff, and I moved his glass, and he was like, and he never spoke to me through the rest of the training, gave me the worst review I've ever had, and was done with it. So don't touch their stuff. All right, so y'all are the critical thinkers. Let me do this. So actually, we'll go through these. 20% of the population, you like things the right way. The question you are always asking is, did I do it right? And because of that, you are harder on yourself than anybody else ever could be. You do have the strongest inner critic. So working on your limiting beliefs is huge. Your communication style is more moderate and more formal. So sometimes we cannot tell what you're feeling because you really hold your game face really, really well. And you're also very literal, where the I's are all about ish. They're like, oh yeah, I'll be there at 4-ish, which means 5:30. Over on this side, you're like, no, you need to be there at 4:57. Your leadership style is conscientious. You love rules, the hierarchy that I talked about, and there's a moral authority to you that grants you a lot of your leadership style. People look to you, know that you're trustworthy, and you model that for them. So here, the greatest fear is criticism or making a mistake, which is basically being caught in making a mistake. So that's the stuff that will kill you. Eyes don't mind being criticized as long as you don't leave them. So this is where the differences come in. Y'all are the critical thinkers, deep, asking deep questions. You're the big winners on Jeopardy because you guys have the data. Man, always, every single time. You have an editing eye because you make us all better. That's why your name is the improver. You're always told that you're negative and critical, but what you do is you make us all better. So that's the heart behind everything that you do. You love learning, you love research, usually fairly artistic and compassionate. I say S's are the most caring. That's very true to their nature. I see a lot of them in nonprofits and healthcare, but improvers are compassionate, which means to suffer with. You will go into people's suffering and you will be there and you will right wrongs, which a lot of times when you're thinking about a startup, usually you're there because you're overcoming something that needed to be fixed. Analytical, reflective, which is why stuff takes so long, and the D's are like, get it going. But you're trying to make sure there are no mistakes to be made. Serious and accurate. So, just a couple of resources. On my website, Your Authentic Personality, we have a personality tab that has another fun online quiz, mostly to root out personality masks. If you're welcome to take that. There's videos on each of the types if that interests you, so lots of good stuff there. If you want to take a disc, you can scan that QR code. I also have some sheets that I'll leave up front, have the same thing on them, but there's a coupon that you'll want to use. It's normally $50, so this gets 15 off, and the QR code is WR Team for Well-Rounded Team, if this is something that you want to take. And then, of course, if you're interested in a training for your organization, I'd love to be able to talk to you. So I'm not going to finish with my last, and if you're interested in coaching of any kind, please let me know. I'm going to let that go, but I love this quote from Mother Teresa. You can do things that I cannot do, and I can do things that you cannot do, but together we can do great things. Because the point is not well-rounded people, but a well-rounded team with a variety of unique talents and broad experiences that together can take your startup and your life exactly where you want it to go. So thank y'all so much. Yeah.
Okay, well, just one question. So in your dealing with so many different companies and all that, have you found a leadership style that best supports the diversity of all these different types of personalities?
That really comes down to the individual, truly. But if I had to answer that, I would think S's are the most inclusive. A lot of times that's why they had equal numbers on all 4 types, because they're the most observant and they're most appreciative and accepting of all different types. But then it comes down to the individual's character and how they've balanced that out, because then there's decisiveness and the leadership, and sometimes they're slower to make those kind of moves. And in certain industries, certain types will be better off. The visionaries that have done things, if they are not backed up by improvers who are doing that type of more metric kind of work and structural work, it all will fall apart. So it kind of depends. I'd love to talk to you more if there's a specific, yeah, but this is what I do because it was such a hard thing for me. And I come out of D, but that's what I love, for people to see what's great about their type. I want people to understand, because we overvalue the strengths of others and we undervalue what we do. Because we assume if we do it, it's not really a strength. It's just something we do. And that's where we miss what we're really doing well and what we need to spend more time adding skills to and really leveraging. So I think it's such an important concept. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions on your type or somebody on your team or? Yeah.
All of these personality tests are kind of a snapshot. What's your opinion on personality traits changing over time?
It's a great question. What about personality changing over time? So personality is 50-50. 50% is in your DNA, and that will not change over time. But the other 50% is influence and experience. And they say most of that is set by the time you're 16 to 18 years old. So what I find is that personality, in that piece can change based on your environment, and that's based on epigenetics. So that is the study of nurture. And actually, you can turn protein expression on or off based on your environment. So for people who have been in an environment that doesn't respect their strengths, it's not a good way to be, they literally will lose those strengths. So if you put them in the right environment, all of a sudden it can look like their personality changes, but what it did is it brought something back to life. So I'm always looking for like the base layer. That's why I will ask questions about what you were like as a child, because sometimes that's the purest form of who we were before we started editing and listening to the approval and all that. I mean, character development definitely brings out more weaknesses than strengths. And if you think about it, childhood is the process of maturation. It's just growing people up. When people are immature, which every kid is, your weaknesses will show. You'll see more weaknesses than strengths. You'll learn who people are based on their weaknesses. So as they grow, you'll see more of the strengths, but it's usually still in the same category. Does that answer your question? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a big one. I get that one all the time. Anything else? Yeah. See? Uh-huh.
But I find that I get a lot of negative feedback when I'm correct. I think particularly because I am a woman.
Yes.
So I want to know how I can use, because that's a natural strength, but people don't really like when I'm direct.
Yes.
And I try to moderate that some.
Mm-hmm.
When I do, then I'm not really being
Authentic? Yes. So it's a great question. This, again, is the hardest one, especially this combination. And actually, that's what Savannah, the oldest daughter, is. And so there is that piece of moderation. Sometimes what I do, especially if people understand this language, or to explain, say, I'm going into D mode, and I need to speak something directly, especially if they're really on the softer side, or they're not understanding, like, this part of my personality is like this, so I want to share this with you. So I will, and it depends. If I'm talking to a man, I have to do less explaining than I do if I'm talking to a woman a lot of times. The other thing is to understand what your values are. And when I talk in the language of values, I'll say, like if you were doing something, one of the values that's very important to me is either quality or, say, learning, or just bringing the best result. And so this is where I'm concerned with where this is going. So when you're talking about values, people can usually get, behind that kind of conversation. If I tell you I value your time and that's why I've been rude, it doesn't excuse my rudeness, but at least it explains what I was trying to do. So I'm always trying to create a little bit of understanding where it's coming from. And in my experience, because I help people with their values, 75% of your values will align with your personality type. So there's a lot of familiarity with that. But it's a great conversation because it's very positive. So you're not just telling someone what they're doing wrong. You're coming at it for what you're trying to bring, the intention, the good intention behind it. And it will take more work. That's the skill side on the other set that you have to, or the set on the other side that you have to work on. But that, I think, is very important. So if you email me, I'll send you the value sheet, which kind of lines it up. It won't be an exact match, but it may really help. Yeah. Did that answer or get closer to it?
One of the things that I really struggle with is I like to improve things, and when I encounter people who really don't want to change at all, they're not interested in
Right.
hearing what I have to say, and it does come across
Mm-hmm.
negatively. Like, hey, here are some things we can do better, and what they hear is you're criticizing what I'm doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not my intent.
Right. And
Like, I can't communicate with some.
it's over here that we're yes. So now we're well, and there is the piece of permission. There.
You know, I've been told in the past, like, hey, I need to have a 20-minute conversation about my weekend before I want to talk to you.
Yes. If you'll just tell them what you had for lunch, then you would be in great shape. Then you could have the hard conversation. I know, and that is accommodating to be able to be heard, to know what someone values so that you can provide that connection so that you can go into it. It does also speak to permission. And there are some people who are not interested in that. And so to gain permission, I would like to share something with you, but if they're not interested, then, and this is the piece that caused a lot of masking for me, is that if my values and who I was not appreciated, I didn't think I had value. So that's about finding the right environment. And over time, sometimes you have to shift because the people who don't want what you have to bring, it's not a great environment. Yeah, and hang in there. Yes. Yes, sir.
So just to piggyback on
Yeah.
accommodating to be heard. So if you're high on all dimensions, and you talked about that in either being burnout or chameleon,
Yeah.
a good or bad thing, because you can like meet people where they are, so you can get.
Yeah, it's a good question, I think. So it's the difference between understanding who you are as an identity and when you're adapting. So if I am fast as a D, but I'm going slow, if now I'm confused, like, am I fast or am I slow? Then I'm getting into an identity issue. But if I know I'm fast, but I'm choosing to go slow, for kindness or respect or whatever, then that's very different. And I speak a lot on authenticity and authentic leadership, and you don't have to bring everything out to be authentic. It's more about how you know, so that where is it appropriate to express. Yeah, so I would say it's never good to be in the burnout pattern or the chameleon pattern. Because remember, the emotions that went with that were uncertainty and helplessness. And I want people to feel grounded. And also to have that relief, like you don't have to do it all. That's kind of that siloing, that in and of itself will cause us to miss all the good stuff. Thank you. You guys having fun over here? You guys going to lunch? Remember, you can't say you're such a C or you're such an I. You're not allowed to say that. But you can say you're C, and it's a great way to talk to someone about some weaknesses is you're C, I'm having a hard time with. Because then it's not like you I'm having a hard time with, that kind of thing. So I always appreciate that, to be like, okay.
Like I said, I was thinking about my marriage is kind of like this opposite.
Absolutely, yes.
I can think of all the negative things, but I think of all the really good things I've done in our house.
Absolutely, yes.
Things that we wouldn't have done.
Well, and that's it. And that's what the skills that we've learned because of the strengths of the other person. Absolutely. Yeah, we just don't want the confusion, for sure. And great relationships are opposite on personality, but they have shared values. So that's kind of the sweet spot. Because if you just are trying to meet each other's needs and their needs get met in other places, then you don't have much of a relationship if they're just filling gaps. Yeah.
So as connectors, I think we're pretty good salespeople.
Yes.
We also lack that follow-up
Yes.
for sales. So how would you compare in a organization and who we're with that?
Absolutely. Because that is, I mean, well, what do you mean? What position would you pair with that? Let me throw that out to the group. If you have a salesperson and you're truly just in sales for the organization. So to me, it's more of an assistant. Like that's what my assistant follows up for me. She's actually a DC, so she finishes things for me. But what do y'all think as far as a position that would be a great complement, that would make sense? Because this is where you want to be able to delegate that's appropriate. What are y'all's thoughts about that? Who could complement and bring the follow-up as a position?
I think for someone who's more C and more rigid, I think what I would need from you is what exactly is it that you need me to do. So I want your expectations, and I don't necessarily want you to tell me how to do it, but I want you to tell me what the problem is and what exactly it is that you want me to fix.
So whether it's in technical support, potentially in some kind of admin, thank you, very nice. Or again, like there's a way, I always said when I was in sales for years, like, I'm taking myself to work, to lunch on Secretary's Day when it was called Secretary's Day, like, because I do it all. But where can you find apps or other people? And also sometimes it's just, I think working with people will bring out the best in you. So holding yourself accountable through the use of someone else. If you had your manager, your director, some other colleague that y'all hold each other accountable, sometimes that can bring more of that follow through, because you're not going to want to disappoint a person. They matter too much to you. And thinking about what you're doing for your clients, because that's what you're all about, is the people connection. So there's different ways that I would do it, but it's kind of, I don't know if I would go with a specific job title, but it's, if y'all have others, please.
I think part of it is, like, I'll go to a conference, I'll get 100 business cards, right? And then it's like, oh, I've got to now email all these people. I'm like, emailing sucks. Talking to them is really fun. So one thing my cousin has, like, he really hates emails. So I was like, tell him, maybe just call them, right? Like, don't do your email.
Great idea. Use your strengths. Yeah.
Or if you have like a kind of more of a lead generation position, then you have maybe more of a follow-up as well.
Absolutely. And even at the sales meetings, finding out people who might, just because eyes are good in sales doesn't mean everybody in sales is an eye. And that doesn't mean they're not necessarily bad. They have an expertise that they're bringing to it. So even finding someone who might be your opposite in the company that you could trade things on. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'll come to you in just a second. Oh, yeah. Yeah?
Yeah, so I guess I have one question about when somebody asks me a question, I just want to take a little time to answer the question. Like I said, if someone on the team says something, I ask them, I want to give you a good answer. I can't come up with an immediate answer.
Exactly.
And so I honestly don't know how to handle the process. And I'm still.
Well, in D's, they can be jerks about seeing that as a weakness. And that's what the best thing you can do is to really stand up for yourself and to say, I'm going to need a few minutes. Literally, like that's the way my brain works. And to even explain that, my type, because your type can do things that D's can't touch. That's the thing. Your ability to connect with people and see things from that processing. So some of it is just going toe to toe and holding the space. I had a client years ago who is an S, and she had a bunch of cousins who were D's, and they went to this family reunion, all as adults, and the D's were like, where are we going to lunch? And they all started firing off different opinions. And they finally got to her, and she goes, it doesn't matter to me. And they were like, you are such a wuss. You don't have an opinion. I can't believe you. And she said, because she goes, no, I actually just value time with all of you, and it's more important that we be together than where we go to eat. So it was a little bit like, so sit down, Sally, and then she got to choose. So sometimes it's just simply advocating for who you are and how you do things. And if they're going to judge, I think just keeps going toe to toe, because they will respect that. Yeah. Then you just give them one of those. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I was just, you're talking a lot about like opposite personalities and things like you still have a good working relationship with someone you're like extremely similar to?
Absolutely. What I do see with that, because then you just kind of get each other, like you're finishing each other's sentences in that way. But what sometimes happens is that their weaknesses bug you because they're the same weaknesses that you're working on in yourself. So sometimes that is where you get caught up, but absolutely. Like in the DIS report, it will talk about who you work best with. And like S's work best with everybody because they can see what everybody needs and they're very accommodating in that way. D's work best with S's. But if you're the same, D's on D's are pretty hard. That's like, is that what you're thinking of? Like, where do you land?
I have mostly C.
C?
I have a lot of D also.
Okay.
I see my boss is having mostly D.
Okay.
Like there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
So sometimes I feel like I default to like
The C? Do you go to the C when you're around the D's? Yeah, and that would kind of, you got out D'd, because also based on the hierarchy within that. So that can be the case, but you get it. Like, you know to move fast, you know what they're thinking, you know what they want. So in that way, that's excellent. And then the question or kind of the thing that you want to work on is how can you slowly but surely bring as much of your D into that as you can. And maybe having that conversation, because D's don't always delegate well because they like having responsibility. So making sure you're getting as much because you're completely capable to be able to run with that stuff. Yeah. Thank you guys for staying for so long and asking the questions. Anything else? Please contact me, email me. I'd love to talk to you about any of this. Yeah. I think I probably forgot it. Thank you, because you're on the C. So if I do math, the C's, and in fact, thank you. I know one of the C's was able to, I had a former test I had online, and she was able to send it to me because she wondered what her personality test was, but she sent it with the one typo. I was like, thank you, thank you, and she found the typo. 10%, 20%, 50, and 20. And that's majors and minors. Yeah, and that's according to the Institute for Motivational Living. It's a coaching company. Yeah, thank you. But I think it's interesting. It's not 25 all around, and it makes sense. You need more people who are good with people, wanting to serve people, fewer people who are at the top and telling everybody what to do. But everybody serves a unique purpose. So thinking about your team and are you well-rounded as a team, or who's going to have to represent for these different perspectives? You know, is it consistent enough? Is it bringing inspiration? Is it visionary? You know, are you getting things done? Are you making change where change needs to happen? And is it staying in this place that is, you know, high quality? You're bringing an excellent result. So all are needed. Yeah, so 20, and stabilizer is 50, and C improver is 20, and doer is 10. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Yes.